Okay, welcome to Spirit Talk. We'll be inviting guests to sit with us and tell us about their spiritual journey. We hope you find their stories encouraging and enjoyable. Please feel free to reach out with us for comments or suggestions. All right, let's get started. Introduce yourself, my friend, and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay. Well, my name is Leah. I did create a kind of a persona called LM Lepley, and you can look me up by that handle on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, I delved into the spiritual journey at a very young age, probably since I was 11, and that has progressed very much over the last couple decades. Now I'm 34, so it's been quite a journey at that. But through the progression of that journey, I have decided to launch a couple different initiatives surrounding consciousness and awakening and the power of the mind and the self and sovereignty. So that's just kind of what I'm doing now. I'm launching a business called Consulting, and literally consulting of the soul, and helping people heal through various different traumatic experiences in life in general, especially with everything that's going on in our world today. It's something it's very important work. So that, coupled with a podcast and a couple other businesses on the side, I'm definitely an entrepreneur or soulpreneur, if you will. So I'm just really excited to be here and share all the details.
Oh, that's great. And
Yeah.
I want to start by saying that everyone is just so very thankful for all the things that you do and just for your light in life in general.
Yeah.
I'd like you to talk to us a little bit more about what happened when you were 11. Explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and that was predominantly because of my father's side of the family. My mother lost her parents at a young age and really didn't have much family. At the time, it was very controversial. She was dating a black man. I'm mixed. I'm half white, half black. And so I think a lot of her family had passed. The other portion of her family had just kind of disowned her at that time, because it was just, at that time, I think, what was it, 1970s into the 80s. So at that juncture, she held on to my father and his family with all her might, and that caused her to move from California over to New Jersey, and that's where I was conceived, essentially raised there, and that's where the faith, or the beginning of the traditionally based faith, was introduced to me. So growing up in that kind of a box, I guess, and understanding religion in a very different way, at a young age, it just never really vibed with me. I don't really know how else to put it. It just didn't seem right.
I think a lot of us can relate. Yes.
Yeah. So it just kind of put me on edge a little bit as I was growing up. And then my mom and father were married for about 10 years. He was probably faithful for about 1 year out of 10. And so that inevitably led to their divorce at age 4 for me. And my mom kind of took her own journey and had decided to explore the same sex. So through that journey, she discovered that she actually did have feelings for women. And so she dated on and off, and eventually met a woman named Barbara, who was extremely spiritual, and they wound up hitting it off. It took them 2 weeks, and they kind of U-hauled it, if you will. And sure enough, by the time I was 11, we all moved into the same condominium in the New Jersey area. So that was really the beginning for me. That was the introduction into my spirituality and the capability that we all have as human beings.
So what kind of things did Barbara introduce you to? How did she say that to an 11-year-old?
I mean, I just remember it started out with books, and I will never forget that she always used to sit at this coffee table. She had a very favorite spot at this coffee table in the middle of the living room. And she always had these books about astrology and about the signs and the zodiac. And she had these ruin books and actually a pack of ruins on the coffee table. And she went through different meditative practices. Like when I'd come home from school, I would see her in deep meditation and not really know. I'm like, is she sleeping? Is she taking a nap? Like, I don't know what this is. And so I think it was just, that introduction was so just unintentional. I want to say, like, it just happened because
it wasn't a teaching, it was an observing.
Right. It was more of an observation of this stuff is going on. So then that just led me to have questions, right? Because you're young, you're like, this is what I thought religion was. This is what I'd really been raised in. And then all of a sudden switching to, 2 women living in a house, essentially having 2 moms, and being exposed to a different essence of being spiritual. So I think by having all these different things around, and it just conjured a lot of curiosity. And I sat with her many times, especially after school, I remember, and I just asked a ton of questions. And she just was extremely, she was vulnerable and transparent, and treated me in that respect as an adult. Like, I'm just going to tell you how it is. And I appreciated her being so forthright, I guess, because it really expanded upon my knowledge of being spiritual and religion and everything in between.
Do you feel that there was an aha moment, or that it just kind of built upon itself for you?
I definitely think there were just several building blocks throughout my childhood. There were experiences that I definitely had. It almost felt like a gateway sort of opened up for me. And I was just granted permission almost to explore that aspect of myself. And after I had many sessions of questions, read a couple of different books, and had these basically one-on-one talks with her, it just opened up something. And I remember I started having vivid dreams. I started to see things like figures, like especially against like a dark background. Like there was a really long hallway in the condo that we were living in, and there used to be they used to keep a light on at the end of the hall that just kind of glimmered a little bit. And I just remembered if I caught something out of the corner of my eye, I could just see like orbs or outlines of figures. And it would just, initially it would scare me. I was, at that time, I think it was like 11 to 14, we were living in this house, and I was learning all these things.
Yeah.
So it was a little off-putting, but I don't think I had any type of aha moment until much later on.
Oh,
Yeah.
explain that one to us then. What was a big aha moment for you?
So, and I don't know that it was one foul swoop, right? And then maybe there were just different trajectories as well. Because I remember in 2000, I had a lot of different experiences, as one would have. And then sometimes you just kind of like fluff it off to the side, like, oh, I don't know what that was, or that was a weird dream, or I can't believe I could see that. You know, people think you're crazy, and you're like, okay, maybe I'm just going to stuff this down because I don't want to talk about it. So I think in 2014 was the first aha moment. And that was like I said, I really feel like there's 2 different trajectories here. That was the first one where I understood a little bit more about what we would call the deep state now. I learned a little bit more about government and extraterrestrial beings who maybe didn't have our best interest in mind. And arguably that's what's coming up in the forefront right now in the wake of the pandemic. So that was kind of the first aha moment. And that was launched when I was watching a Netflix series, or not, it wasn't a series, it was a documentary called Zeitgeist. I don't even know if they still have it.
Yes. Yeah. It was on Netflix. Yeah.
Right. They had a first one and they had a second one. Yeah. And I watched both, but I think I don't know what even prompted me to watch that. Cause I know before then it was like all about The Secret, like the movie that turned to like several different books. So I watched The Secret, and then, I had that kind of understanding, which was like literally just the tip of the iceberg, and it was in its own category, but nevertheless it still opens something up.
Yes.
And then a couple years later in 2014 is when I saw Zeitgeist, and I saw a totally different side, arguably going from 3D to 4D to 5D and everything in between. So after watching that, that opened up a whole new spectrum for me. I was met with a lot of adversity. I was met with what's the term? A lot of cognitive dissonance around that information. It was a lot. It was a lot to absorb. And then from that point, Barbara, she was a heavy smoker since young age, like 14 all the way up to maybe 67. She was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2015, started going through treatments in 2016, and then it was June of 2016 that she actually finally passed. But that was the apex of the aha, because I went from theory, I went from kind of having experiences here and there, questioning a lot of people, sitting with a lot of people, trying to get a lot of validation, to, oh my God, my eyes are wide. I'll never forget, I was in the hotel room because she was getting treatment at the Moffitt Center in Tampa, Florida. And I had flown out from Colorado to Florida to meet my mom. And there was a scare that we thought she was going to die a few months earlier. I wound up pulling through. But it was during that time where we thought she was just literally on her deathbed, that we were sleeping in hotel rooms next to the hospital. And it was the first or second, maybe the second night that my mom and I kind of got this hotel room, that I had a vision that came to me. And it was the first time where I was jolted awake out of sleep and my eyes shot open. They were wide open, but I could still see the apparition, or I could still see the vision. And that was the first time I'd ever had an experience like that. And from that point, I mean, the floodgates opened. I could see everything. Like, my mind's eye just shot open. And again, a couple months later, Barbara actually did pass, and then everything sort of escalated from that point. So she was substantial in my life and in laying that foundation. Yeah. And then even there are things connected to her that I can't necessarily explain or understand that has led me down this journey. So did I answer the question?
You did. And what I find is interesting, and I don't know if anyone else is catching that, but when she was at her time of, and the first time, she probably really did, leave her body for a while and everything. It feels like to me that she really came to you in a connection and made that connection, and, could have, really became part of your spirit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And was almost feeding you the knowledge that way and giving you what you needed there. I don't know. I just think it makes sense that she was connecting with you spiritually there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, even to this day, I think, I don't know necessarily how energetically she's around. I think we evolve once we cross over and we go through different phases. And I know that she's still around me now. And at this point in my life, I just feel like, again, I'm reaching another aha in a really big way. And I'm just starting that, like, I literally just stepped through the doorway, like in the last 72 hours, I want to say. So I'm at that journey, or I'm at that juncture again.
I love it. And I am reminded of, it feels like to me that I've known you a while now. And so what I've seen and observed is that you do go through these periods of, it feels like you get loads of downloads, lots of information, and then you feel like you have to process it. And then once you process it, you kind of make another big leap forward in your journey.
Yeah.
And I've seen a few of those with you. And what also strikes me with you is that you're one, and I'm sure people who have been following some of my writings on Dragonfly will see that you're very multidimensional to me. I feel like you are one of those who on this earth doesn't only stay in this third dimension, who notices all of them. And I don't know if you can speak to that, but I would love if you could, because I know there's a lot of people that don't understand that, and like you, sometimes feel very overwhelmed by it. So if there's anything along those lines you could share, I would appreciate it.
No, I absolutely. And I love that you just said that, because I got a download last week. It was intense. This entire thing has been intense. And if it's okay to speak to what's going on in the world right now, I'd love to talk about that, because some of the download pertains to what's happening.
Absolutely.
Something shifted big time inside of me the tail end of 2019, and I went through what many people call a dark night of the soul, which I know many people are not unfamiliar with. I thought that I had a dark night of the soul, or maybe a couple, and maybe I did in some capacity, but it was nothing like the one that I experienced in November. And it was deep, it was dark, it felt never ending, and it led me it led me down a path of pretty severe depression and questioning everything, and wanting to know what it was really all for. And it was coming through that, kind of starting to come out of it in December, and then wanting to set really awesome intentions for 2020. And I love that whole caption, right? 2020 vision. We're going to do this. We're going to set it up. We're going to do it right. And then obviously, what was it? The official announcement, was it like January 26th or something about COVID-19 or the coronavirus? And then everything sort of just shifted. So, and with that shift, my energy shifted. And so I was haunted even before that and I wish I could show the picture. Maybe I can leave it in the comments somewhere, but this vision kept coming to me from, I want to say, like the middle of last year all the way up through maybe like a week ago. And it's like this huge orb, like circular orb that has these little like things popping out of it, almost looking like a virus. It almost looks like, you know what I'm saying? Like the COVID-19.
Yeah, like you would see underneath in a microscope or something.
Yeah, exactly. It looked like that. It looked like a molecule of some sort, or a virus molecule, I guess. I don't know. And I remember there were a couple times where it like shook me. Like I was in deep, like almost arguably REM sleep, and jolted awake to the point where I actually woke Annie, like my wife, who was sleeping right next to me, and I'm like panting because my eyes shot open and I could see this thing hovering at the end of the bed. And I'm like, what is that? And I wasn't scared. Like, I don't want to say that I was fearful, but obviously you have questions. You're like,
right.
What was that?
What is that?
And what was that? And why does it keep coming? Because it had continued to show itself every couple of weeks.
Wow.
Now, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, was this a prediction? Was this a warning? Was this a flag? Was this something? Because within that time, I had a couple other really intense dreams that were very lucid. I felt like I was very conscious and in control, as one would describe. And I had a lot of like ET-like interactions. All through this, I'm collecting these downloads or this data. I'm trying to understand it. And the pandemic is starting its incline and spreading itself and coming over to the States. As this is happening, I'm noticing that my news feed on Instagram, on Facebook, on Google searches, on the news, things are starting to shift. So I'm listening, and I have, I talk to many different people from many different backgrounds, some who are spiritual, some who are very scientific, some, all over, a wide spectrum. And so at any given time, I think it's important to be mutable so you can relate to people, you can meet them where they're at and have a conversation. And so within these interactions and within having these conversations is where I, for the first time, noticed the switch up. Before I was like, well, I'm a Sagittarius and I'm just super mutable and, I just adapt to people, which is true, that's fine. But there's also another adaptation process that happens. And I was able to speak to it and saying, oh my God. And then I got a download. So through all of that, I got a download. I went into like a meditation and I saw myself on a rotating bar stool, like similar to like the one that you would sit on if you were like sitting at a drum set.
Okay.
Where you're able to like rotate really easily. And then inside the download where I'm sitting on the seat, I see like 3 different telescope looking things. And at any given time, I feel like I'm switching, where I'm like, okay, I'm looking through a 3D lens. Okay, I'm looking through a 4D lens now. Okay, I'm looking through a 5D, and then borderline looking through 6D at the same time. So so when I'm sitting with people, it happens more whenever I'm inside of an interaction. So with you, for example, it was so easy when we had our tea visits and stuff, where we're talking to like 40, 50, 60, arguably 70 at certain junctures. And it was awesome. I get a high, a natural high when we talk about that kind of stuff. But a lot of times, when you're talking to people who are on a different wavelength, a different vibrational frequency, or a different level, they're very much coming through that 3D lens as we understand the world to have been prior to this, in my opinion, this whole pandemic, which now we're in the process of switching up into 4D,
Yes.
where we're seeing things very differently as a collective, and shifting accordingly. So it was just interesting to get that download, to understand that I speak to people when they're in that 3D mindset of like, so for example, as it relates to the pandemic, people are, well, I got to wash my hands and I have to wear my mask and I have to, what's going to happen to the stock market? And, what about our savings? And what about our retirement plan? And, should I buy a home right now? I don't really know what's going to happen. What's the government going to say? What does this mean? Does this mean that Trump is going to get elected again for another term? To 4D, understanding that, well, first of all, let's talk about government. Is it really a government that we can trust? Is this whole 5G tower system coming into play for a reason? Is this the cause of the virus? What's really going on? Are there deep satanic rituals happening underground that we're just now learning about? Is there really like a double-sided meaning to the news? Is this stuff really being told to us in the forefront, but it's on the sly? So, they're following some type, so what people would call a conspiracy theorist, I guess, is like a 4D, but it's like a low vibrational 4D. And then shifting again to the 5D, understanding that there is a broad scope here, that the shift needed to happen, to wake us up, to cause a disruption that was large enough to force us into a process of transmutation, a process of evolution that's imperative if we intend to sustain survival on this planet, and that everything happens as it should. Everything is happening for a reason, and as hard as it is to digest, this is imperative. It just needs to happen.
And
So
I
that's just,
got to go with you on that. And I've been hearing for a very long time, we've been aware that there was going to be something to cause the shift into the fourth and fifth dimension. And a lot of people were always of the thought that it was going to be a big cataclysm, a big volcano, a big this or a big, some kind of action, the earth actually shifting, which I still feel like might happen, the shifty thing. But
right.
it kind of came about in a way we weren't expecting.
Totally.
But I'm with you. I really think that's the point. This is a good time. People are getting rid of some of their programming and their conditioning, and they're stepping away from those things, and they're seeing things in a different way. And we're raising the vibration level, and so many more people are ready to look at things in the fourth and fifth levels.
Right.
I'm
Totally.
sorry I interrupted you. You can keep going along those lines. You were on the fifth.
Clearly, I go on a tangent. No, I appreciate you. And honestly, Lanae, like, you were the person that I could talk to about this stuff. You were the first person to tell me, like, we're here for a reason and we're getting ready for something. We're ramping up, like we're getting ready. Like, so you get used to being in your skin, find your strength, find your purpose, continue on the path, because something's coming. And you volunteered to be here for a reason. Like, you were the person for me to tell me all of this. And I think about you, like, every time I'm getting these downloads, honestly, every time, like, more affirmation is coming forward as to why we're going through this and why this is happening and why is it now. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, we talked about this. Like, it blows my mind. It just really it blows my mind. It's great.
I know, me too, because, and it's good validation too, because, it's like I've been sitting and having those conversations mostly with you for a very long time. And it's really nice to see it happening, and that it wasn't just me making stuff up. And
right. It's really affirming.
Better.
Yeah, totally. We just didn't, like you said, I think that we were shell shocked because I think, I don't even know what to think, honestly. I think, like you said, we were kind of projecting it looking like a solar flare or something. Like we're projecting it,
Yes.
yeah, like it looking much different than it had manifested itself to actually
Yes.
be.
And so it
But
took me a minute, but I'm with you. But when it started happening, I was like, oh, well, here we are.
right,
This is what
totally.
happened.
Right. Yeah. I guess this, right. And I kind of had that at some point. I think the last couple of weeks, I'm like, all right, well, this is it. This
Yep.
is it. And I'm only now starting to get, like I said, more comfortable being in the role that many of us are going to be in, because that was also something that you had said to me, was that people are going to need that that voice of hope, that understanding. People are going to need some type of validation. Not that we are here to give permission to anyone, because I try to be so careful with how I word things, because it is so imperative. And my number one objective is to give the power back to the people. And that sovereignty and discernment is essential, and it is number one. And that nobody, under any circumstance, for any reason, should be giving their power away to anyone. And the whole point here is that we need to understand what we are capable of. Because I know I get lost down rabbit holes all the time listening to different sources and people who are projecting different things, and, you know, fake news, real news, all the things.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get lost down someone else's explanation or someone else's untruth or their own truth or whatever it might be. And the lesson for all of this, at least one of them, is just to really trust ourselves, to understand intuitively what path to go down, what sources to maybe research and believe, and what theory that we adopt from that point. So I just personally, I want to be a beacon, but I don't want people to buy into any type of like Jesus or Christ like worship. Not that it would, not for me necessarily, but anyone who is going to be in a public eye in this type of forum, if that
Exactly.
makes any sense.
It
Yeah.
does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just be listening to yourself.
Right.
That's important. There's a
So,
couple things that we're going to end up either on this one or on your podcast. We're going to circle around to, because
okay.
I know that you and I talk about this a lot, and we're going to find a way to, or your podcast, you know, the deep state and the government and the
Yeah.
entities. We're going to get back to that.
Okay.
But I think we'll call it a day for now on this. And oh my gosh, I just can't tell you how thankful I am that you're doing this, and that you're my first interview. And
Am I? Oh,
yeah,
that's
you
exciting.
are.
Oh, good.
And I hope that, I want to encourage other people, if you want to do this with us, please just, you know, message me and let me know. I'd love to have you on. I do have a few other people lined out. As soon as Leah was helping me figure out how to do this. So now that I might know how, we can go forward. And just thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I would love to have you back, because you have so many things to offer. So hopefully you can come back and
Oh
share.
my God, it is an absolute gift and a pleasure. And thank you for creating a forum like this for us to talk on. I think it's so important now more than ever. So it is my sincerest pleasure.
Agreed. All right. Thank you. Enjoy your journey.
Thank you. Thank you.